In June of 1816, it snowed in New England. Not a freak flurry, proper snow, on green fields, on sheep that had just been shorn. Farmers wore winter coats to haying season. In Europe, it rained for 8 straight weeks, the harvest drowned, and bread prices doubled. The sun rose pale and stayed pale, month after month, and nobody on Earth knew why. The answer was a mountain most of them had never heard of, on the other side of the planet, that had exploded the year before. One volcano canceled summer. Once. It stopped after a year, and history moved on. Today, we don't let it stop. This is what happens if the year without a summer lasted a decade. First, the real history. In April 1815, Mount Tambora, in what's now Indonesia, produced the most powerful eruption in recorded human history. Heard 2,000 kilometers away, tens of thousands dead in the region within weeks. But the main character of this story is what went up. A colossal cloud of sulfur, flung so high it wrapped the entire stratosphere in a thin reflective veil. Earth's sunshine now had a dimmer switch, and somebody had turned it down. The following year, the global thermostat dropped, only a degree or so on average, but weather doesn't do averages. It does frosts in June, snow in July, killing cold in August. New Englanders would remember 1816 with a nickname, 1800, and froze to death. And that single cold year rearranged the world. Europe got bread riots. Historians call it the last great subsistence crisis of the Western world. Ireland got famine and a typhus epidemic. Thousands of ruined Vermont and New Hampshire farmers packed up and moved west, accelerating the settlement of Ohio and Indiana. And the culture? A group of bored, reined-in writers on Lake Geneva held a ghost story contest because going outside was pointless, and a teenager named Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, while Byron's doctor sketched the modern vampire. 2 monster genres, 1 wet week. Meanwhile, oats got so expensive that feeding a horse became a luxury, and the very next year a German inventor unveiled a 2-wheeled running machine, the ancestor of the bicycle. Last episode, we deleted the horse from history. In 1816, oat prices gave it a try. Now let's break it. Here's the thing about volcanic veils. They settle out. 2 or 3 years, and the sky rinses clean. That's why 1816 was a year without a summer, not a decade. So our point of divergence is simple bad luck. The 1810s cluster keeps firing. Another giant eruption in 1817. A third in the early 20s. Is that cheating? No, because it has happened before. In the 530s AD, 2 or 3 massive eruptions in a row dimmed the sun for years. Tree rings show it, ice cores show it. Historians now call 536 the worst year to be alive. Crops failed from Ireland to China, and the cold opened the door for plague and collapse. We are not inventing new physics. We are photocopying the 6th century onto the 19th. Summer is cancelled. For 10 years, Europe enters this decade in the worst possible shape. It has just finished 20 years of Napoleonic wars. Treasuries are empty. Armies are demobilized and unemployed, and the freshly restored kings are promising stability. Instead, they get 10 harvests that fail, or half fail. Bread, already most of a working family's budget, becomes the political question. In our timeline, Europe's great revolutionary wave came in 1848, and even then, food prices lit the fuse. In this timeline, that wave arrives a generation early. Hungry crowds in the 1820s don't read pamphlets about constitutions, they read bakery price boards. Thrones wobble while the sky stays milky. The carefully arranged post-war order, balanced like fine china, meets a decade with frost in every month. Ireland, in real history, suffered through 1816 and then had 30 years to grow more dependent on a single crop before the Great Famine struck. In this timeline, the catastrophe comes early, in the 1820s. Cold, blight-friendly seasons, no relief infrastructure, no steamships, no organized aid. It is worse, sooner. And the exodus comes with it. The Irish wave that built American cities arrives a full generation ahead of schedule, colliding with an America that is itself in motion, because New England farming is now simply over. The westward land rush that 1816 started becomes a stampede. The American interior fills up faster, cities get their cheap labor earlier, and the entire American 19th century gets compressed. Remember the potato episode's migration engine? This timeline installs it early, with a bigger motor. This was never just a Western story. In real history, the cold years wrecked rice harvests in China's Yunnan province so badly that farmers switched to a hardier cash crop, the opium poppy. Give that process 10 years instead of 3, and the opium economy entrenches a generation early, with everything that later follows from it. The monsoon system, knocked off rhythm by the veil, misfires year after year. Some historians already link the post-Tambora disruption to the Great Cholera pandemic that spread out of Bengal. In this timeline, that acceleration gets a decade of running starts, and the Qing dynasty's famous granary system, the world's most sophisticated famine insurance, faces a stress test no insurance survives. 10 claims in a row. Asia's 19th century crises don't change their nature here. They just arrive together. But here's what a decade of catastrophe also does. It compresses 50 years of invention into 10. The cold hardy potato, our old crowned friend, becomes Europe's official survival strategy a generation early. Canning, invented for Napoleon's armies just a few years before, explodes from military curiosity into a food industry. Greenhouses go from aristocratic toys to serious agriculture. Weather watching becomes a science with funding, because now everyone understands the sky is a matter of state. And in Darmstadt, a boy named Justus von Liebig grows up hungry through the famine years. In our timeline, that boy became the father of agricultural chemistry, the science that eventually gave us fertilizer. This timeline just makes him, and 1,000 like him, start sooner. The fertilizer century, it turns out, begins in the frost. And with oats unaffordable for 10 straight years, the bicycle stops being a joke and starts being transportation, decades early. And the culture bends to the sky. 10 Geneva summers of rain means the Gothic doesn't stay a genre. It becomes the voice of the era. Byron's poem, Darkness, written in that first dim year, reads in this timeline like a national anthem. Sunsets stay volcanic and blazing for years. The paintings we'd call exaggerated are, here, just realism. And a generation grows up assuming the sky is hostile, so they build like it. Granaries, food reserves, crop insurance, weather stations. Which brings the receipt, because this series always keeps one. The decade kills hundreds of thousands, through hunger, typhus, cholera, that our timeline never lost. And the same decade drags food security, agricultural science, and disaster planning 30 years into the past, sparing millions later. Catastrophe as compressed research program. Both lines on the receipt are real. This series keeps finding the same lesson wearing different costumes. Fertilizer was calories. The potato was calories. The horse was speed. And this episode is the quiet assumption underneath all of them, that the sky will behave. Every empire ever built, every granary, every army, every price of bread, rests on that assumption. And the sky never signed the contract. We build statues to generals and inventors. Nobody has ever built a statue to a decent harvest. Even though every statue, general, and inventor stood on top of one. What's the biggest thing the weather ever did to history? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe. Next timeline's forecast. Cloudy, with a chance of divergence.